Time for AgNow weather. Matt Makens here. Let's do a quick breakdown of some of the hazards coming our way for the next week to 2 weeks. So we're going to be watching out for winds across the Four Corners region. This is also a very dry area, as we'll hit on in this video, and this will lead to some heightened fire dangers for any sort of ignition sources that do occur. Excessive heat down across the south. We'll have more on the record temperatures in a moment. Very heavy rainfall across the Gulf Coast states, and then we have some isolated flooding here to the north. That's a combination of incoming rain plus snow melt. And lots of rain have been falling there across the Midwest, leading to some flooding with any additional rainfall that's on the way. So that's a quick recap of some of the hazards. Probably most notable will be the risks of severe weather across the eastern U.S., but for the next couple of days it's going to be focused on the southeast where that heavy rainfall is. You can always get these maps, I shouldn't say always because I might be running late, but on Twitter, Matt Makens on Twitter, and you can see these maps. I'll post them every morning for a severe weather outlook, or you can go to SPC's website, great outlook section there, and gives you a early heads up of any severe weather that may be coming your way. Let's check on our soils and soil health. Temperatures are coming up pretty quickly. We have a little pocket here in North Dakota with some of the soils that are still a little sluggish to be warming up, but we're closing in on those deadlines as we get everything planted. I know there's some delays around Iowa and things just from recent wet weather, so perhaps you're one of those hoping for some drier days, although it's been nice to have that water. Here's the current soil moisture. Iowa is still very dry in terms of that soil moisture. So is southern Colorado down through New Mexico into West Texas, the panhandle there. Also some sections here hit and miss out across the east and the south where we could use some water to boost the soil moistures. Quite a healthy swath of soil here from Montana down into northern Nebraska. Compare this to earlier this year, about 4 months ago, early January or so. Very dry for the Four Corners, very dry for the West and the Pacific Northwest, extremely dry around Iowa, Illinois, and Missouri down across the Delta country here. But watch as we've changed things. So this is the change comparing the first soil map to that last one. So the soil moisture change in the last 4 months. All the improved areas, that's percentage gain in soil moisture. Those are the blue shades, and that covers a lot of corn country, a lot of cotton country, a lot of grass country, a lot of hay country. We have some pockets here in the Dakotas and Minnesota that could use some work. Close to the foothills in southern Kansas down into the panhandle of Texas, we need some water here. That area has actually been drying out relative to about 4 months ago. Let's check the timeline and see when the storms are going to be firing up and if you can hope for moisture this week, or if you don't want that moisture, you can hope for your dry pockets. As this animation gets going, watch right in here, the southern areas over the weekend and early next week. You'll see that shield of rain, those thunderstorms growing in intensity and coverage. There may be severe weather, damaging thunderstorms there. Once we clear that system out, middle parts of next week, we'll be watching the northern plains and parts of Canada as the system sinks lower, comes into the central states, and again produces very heavy rainfall and potentially some damaging thunderstorms as well. So this timeline is really focusing on the northern plains at times, the southern plains at times, and almost throughout the eastern third of the U.S. Let's check the total water that's going to be coming through with this moisture. You're going to see a notable swath of heavy precip totals from Dallas and Houston stretching out toward the Atlantic Ocean. Also into parts of Colorado, some heavy water is on the way. And that's going to be a combination of rain and snow, but mostly in terms of rain this time as we're pretty warm. As you work northward into the Corn Belt in the Midwest and the upper Midwest, remember that area of dry soils, or gotten drier anyway. Here in the Dakotas and Minnesota, you have some water coming your way, but it's going to amount to anywhere from 1/4 to 1/2 inch in most cases. Once you head down to the south, and we'll fly that map view in from Dallas, close to Houston and north of toward Shreveport, kind of these orange shades into the yellows, that's 4 inches at least. A lot of water. Speaking of a lot of water, in portions of Tennessee, just over the past week, they have 6, 7 isolated 8-inch totals. So really heavy rainfall here. Let's turn to snowfall. Again, kind of limited. Colorado Rockies have a little bit. So too will have Wyoming. But for the next week or so, the snow map is pretty blank. And it's heading in that direction, obviously, as we get later into May and warm things up. Back to the hazards. And speaking of warming things up, remember this area of high heat down across the south? Let's take a look at the records that are going to be possible throughout the week ahead. It's not unusual to have triple digits, but it's unusual for, say, Laredo In parts of South Texas to be hitting 106s, 7s, 8s, 109s, and that's the kind of heat that's going to be headed in for parts of the week ahead. And then throughout Florida, we have a lot of mid and upper 90s. I know we've got some cattle country here, horse country as well. Throughout Florida, you're going to watch as your conditions really dry out rapidly with that heat, and the same for South Texas. Weekly outlooks. Speaking of weeks, let's go with the weekly outlooks here. And we kind of focused on this first week, the 9th through the 16th, where we have a lot of water for the Gulf Coast states and a little bit in Colorado, drier elsewhere. Let's go to the following week, 16th of May through the 23rd, and we're still focusing on the Gulf Coast states and parts of Colorado. Beyond, we have hit and miss moisture mostly on the high plains here, a little bit drier in Illinois, Indiana, and Ohio. And then the last week here, this is the 30th of May through the first week of June, and we have some pockets of water here, mostly focusing on Colorado, Nebraska, Kansas, parts of the Osage country, and back into parts of the eastern Corn Belt. Temperatures during that same span, well, coolest now with all the water that's inundating the south and the southeast, so cooler than normal there. Moderating for next week will bring the temperatures back closer to average in a lot of cases, cool it back down to wrap up May and start off June cooler than average across the south. That's due to the frequency of the storm flow and some of the soil moistures that have been so soggy recently, keeping temperatures a bit cooler than average. That's this week's AgNow Weather Report. We'll see you next time.